Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, January 30th, 2026. I approach this as if I was very calm, cool, and collected and ready to start the show, and none of that is actually true. Kind of scrambling to get to the microphone just in time once again. It's Friday. It tends to happen that way. Just kind of beat by the end of the week. And, by the way, experimenting with a new pair of glasses. Can you see? You can't because it's radio and we don't do video, but I've been thinking about experimenting with that too. Yes, for like 6 years. Don't get too excited. But, I'm kind of curious whether this is going to make it weird to read the stories off of the screen. It's supposed to help, but I'm not certain that that's what actually happened. Anyway, there's lots to get to today, including latest developments breaking in the last, 15 minutes or so on the mainstream media pages. And so I guess really for maybe the last hour or so, it's been the topic of discussion. We told you about this earlier in the week. Don Lemon, the former CNN journalist, now independent journalist, was facing the prospect of arrest when we last left him, for following along as a journalist, apparently, covering the protest at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, where you may recall one of the pastors is a local office ICE official, and so that's why the place was targeted for protest. And the story from Lemon, anyway, is that I don't know whether he got word of the protest before it started and said, yeah, I'd like to cover that, or what, or just happened to be wandering by and said, hey, a protest. But it most likely, given the interest in prosecuting him by the Trump administration, of course, it doesn't really take much to get the Trump administration interested in prosecuting someone who's been a critic and who's also darker of skin. It doesn't take much. But there's still supposed to be a process for it. Anyway, I'm sure they suspect that he was in cahoots, whatever that even means, with the protesters. Or the protesters told them we're going to do a protest and you might be interested in covering it, filming it. It'll make a big story. And he agreed to go along, which still is not really actually an indictable offense. I guess you could question the applicability of the First Amendment if your story is, no, he really was a protester and he's wearing the cloak of a journalist. But since it didn't appear to be engaged in any protest activity, that should exempt him. But the Trump administration and their weirdo, crazy MAGA Republican allies think that they can make a federal charge out of this by saying he was denying the congregants their constitutional right to worship in peace. And as a matter of fact, I think I've seen in one outlet or another this thing described as an anti-Christian protest, which I assure you, you know what? I don't know anything about it, but I can probably feel comfortable promising you it wasn't an anti-Christian protest. But you know how the hyperbole goes with these guys. And speaking of hyperbole, I'll have to make a note to myself for something else, although might be something better discussed when Greg is around because he's such a fan of bringing up the Virginia news. But lots of crazy hyperbole circulating these days. That's sort of their stock and trade. Anyway, where we last left Don Lemon was that the federal government, the DOJ, sought indictments for 8 people based on their incursion, their trespassing on the private property, of City's Church. And the federal magistrate judge that they went to just basically wasn't having it. He issued arrest warrants for 3 of the 8 people they sought to indict. And by the way, at least one other of the people, I think, turns out also to have been a journalist. Whether they were there primarily as a journalist, I'm not sure. But the famous Don Lemon, not the only one, I happened to see on Blue Sky as I was making my way to the microphone I guess I was already here because I saw it on my desktop computer. So anyway, that Minnesota-based independent journalist Georgia Fort, that's her name, not where she was hiding. Georgia Fort has been arrested for filming a protest in the church pastor that works as an ICE manager. So it meets the same description. I imagine it's the same event. So there you go. Georgia Fort is her name. The Letter Hack is the account that's got the story, and I guess a video. Is this Georgia Fort herself producing the video? I have not had a chance to listen to it because the show is already underway. So she's probably explaining what's going on. Just wanted to bring it to your attention that if this is another journalist involved in this, it's not just the famous guy. You should call out the other names too. All right. Well, at any rate, we have discussed on the show that they went to the federal magistrate judge. The magistrate judge said, well, I'll give you arrest warrants for 3 out of the 8. But the other 5 you just don't have a case with for whatever reason, including, I guess, Don Lemon, for which I guess the magistrate judge is not even enough evidence he was participating in the protest. All right, fine. But as you recall, we had to end up reading the letter from the chief judge of the federal district court, distinct from the magistrate judge here. The magistrate judge, will deal with these sorts of immediate request, arrest warrants, etc. But the district court is where defendants would be tried once they're brought to trial. Anyway, they apparently do have the power to review the actions of magistrate judges. They just apparently, it's a rare thing, especially with respect to reviewing the denial of an arrest warrant below. We read the letter from the chief judge of the district court to the chief judge of the appeals court, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, because they got involved too, outlining the rarity that the judge had polled all the judges in the district and asked, have any of you ever been asked to review the denial of a warrant below by a magistrate judge? And no one could remember ever doing it. They adjudged it to be within their power. It just was not done. So, at any rate, the magistrate judge said no. They went to the district court and asked, can you review this and overturn it and essentially issue the arrest warrants in the stead of the magistrate judge? And they said, not right away, certainly, and not without talking to the rest of the my colleagues on the bench. And we've got a meeting on Tuesday, and we'll do it then. And I think they had some weather problems and some other problems, and so there was a delay even further. Meanwhile, he's also handling a dozen other cases arising from ICE activity in Minneapolis, and he's not in good standing. Our ICE and the DOJ not in good standing at the moment with the judge, who, as I recall, is Patrick Schiltz. And Judge Schiltz wrote to the head of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals because apparently he was his refusal to, his reluctance to take up on an emergency and an immediate emergency basis a review of the magistrate judge's denial was then appealed to the 8th Circuit. And I mean, they were really moving like lightning into realms previously unexplored, let's say, right? So magistrate judge says no to the warrants, or at least some of them, most of them. They try to get the district court to overturn the magistrate. They say not so fast. Ooh, I have sound on that too somewhere. I was working on this just the other day as I did this Wizard of Oz thing for Greg. The only question is where it is. Right, okay. Well, we want the magistrate judge's decision overturned.
Not so fast! Not so fast!
Right.
I'll have to give the matter a little thought.
Exactly, right. And so that's that, by the way, leads up to the go away and come back tomorrow, in case you were wondering where that. It's the Wizard of Oz, in case you didn't recognize it all the way. All right, at any rate, so wow, now I have to set myself up once again to go through the process again. Magistrate judge says no. They go to the district court. District court says, hold on, I want to talk to my colleagues. While he's saying, I want to talk to my colleagues, he told them when they were going to talk. It was going to be this week. Might have been Tuesday, ended up getting canceled because of weather and other things and other ICE activity and making it difficult for people to get to the courtroom and making it difficult for the judges to meet and making it difficult to keep the courthouse open. And also when it is open, we are flooded with cases stemming from your idiotic behavior here in Minneapolis. While waiting for the district court to definitively rule, the DOJ is too impatient. They appeal to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. I want a writ of mandamus forcing the district court to issue the warrants that the magistrate would not. Well, the 8th Circuit answered. A panel of, I believe, one, I don't know whether it was Clinton or Biden, like one Democratic appointed judge. You know, they do these things in 3-judge panels. All I remember is that 2 of the judges were Trump appointees. And they said, no, at least your appeal is denied. We're not going to issue a writ of mandamus against the district court judge, forcing him to issue the warrants that the magistrate wouldn't. Wait for the district court to figure things out. So they've been before the magistrate, the district court, and, you know, at least nominally before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. The next step after that is the Supreme Court, okay? So, I mean, I guess you could appeal en banc, but I don't know if they're going to do that. And it's been no all the way down the line, or at least not yet. But last night, Don Lemon got arrested regardless. Now, there are other ways you can properly and rightly make such an arrest. And it was noted, I think, in our earlier coverage, and Don Lemon has been open about it and talking to the rest of the press, that, they'll probably try again. They'll probably try to impanel a grand jury or use one of the sitting grand juries to indict me. And you know about the story about ham sandwiches and lemons, I guess. It's an easy thing, right, normally. But this administration has had terrible results going to grand juries with really specious cases like this. And in several cases, I mean, a good half dozen examples we could probably rattle off without researching too much, where grand juries just said either, no, this case is way too thin and you know it, we're just not going to indict, or said, we know what you're doing. It's not that the evidence is necessarily insufficient. It's that you're trying to charge a person for something that really just isn't a federal crime, or shouldn't be, or at least not as you're describing it to us, all the way up to, we don't care what you say, we hate you guys, and we're not going to do your bidding, and we're not going to hand up an indictment. However, it's justified. It's just not happening for these guys. They're world-class losers at this stuff. It's like losing discharge petitions in Congress. It just, generally speaking, doesn't happen. And then all of a sudden, incompetent, ideological wackadoodles are taking over, dressing up as officers of the court and seeking indictments, and it's not working. And no one can figure it out. Why can't we get indictments? So, is it possible that they went to a grand jury and got an indictment of Don Lemon? I guess. It's been a couple of days. I mean, I wasn't looking in the last few days. But I don't know. It seems a little bit unlikely that they would have found a grand jury that would be cooperative and turn it around that quickly. But, if that's your sole focus and you got to get this indictment, you could do that in a couple of days. What's missing from all of the reports is any word that they actually did that. And ordinarily, that would be the kind of thing that, like Trump, they'd go to the press, they'd imitate the boss and show the thing around and have a big press conference, or at least say, today the grand jury issued an indictment and we're going to go execute an arrest against it. But no word on that. Instead, not only did they arrest him, but where did they arrest him? They arrested him in Los Angeles, which you may or may not know. You can open up your Maps app and look. It's not in Minnesota, Los Angeles. And Lemon was covering the Grammy Awards, apparently. Do they have Grammy Awards on Thursday night? I guess so. I don't pay attention to the awards, but now I will. They arrested him while he was covering the Grammys, and I assume dressed nicely and on whatever red carpet they may have there and interviewing celebrities. And so for maximum effect, embarrassment, they arrest him in front of all the celebrities. Although that is actually kind of stupid because you're talking about arresting him probably in front of a fairly left-leaning celebrity crowd, I would guess, at the Grammys. And they're all also going inside to make speeches. I don't know that anybody made any speeches. I don't know what the timing was. That would have been something to see an acceptance speech at the Grammys. And by the way, they just arrested Don Lemon outside with, as far as I know, no warrant, no indictment, no nothing. I feel like there's got to be something somewhere, but I also feel like we might actually have arrived at the point where Trump is just saying, you guys are going to have to arrest him or you're all fired. And some people did it. Like maybe Ed Martin ordered the arrest. I don't know. We'll have to explore the situation. So the New York Times has an article on it. They gave me a difficult time about accessing it this morning, but it's here. Federal agents arrest Don Lemon over Minnesota church protest. And again, notice what's missing here, right? The former CNN anchor has said he was not demonstrating, but reporting as a journalist during the interruption of a service inside the St. Paul Church earlier this month. And as others have noted, Adam Serwer is the one I happen to see. This is a huge attack on the First Amendment, although it's an attack on everything, all the amendments. Well, amendment-wise, Fifth Amendment as well, I guess. There has to be a grand jury indictment or an arrest warrant or something somewhere in order to effect this arrest. But at any rate, maybe there isn't. And, you know, Trump and paperwork, man, the Constitution might get in the way. Hamed Al-Aziz, Devlin Barrett, and Alan Feuer reported this story from out of Washington, where the arrest did not take place, the protest did not take place, the magistrate judge does not sit. I don't know. It's a Washington thing. It's a late-breaking story. The former CNN anchor Don Lemon was arrested late Thursday night on charges that he violated federal law during a protest at a church in St. Paul, Minnesota. His lawyer said, and remember who his lawyer is, the high-powered, that's like the title, the high-powered Abby Lowell. So he won't lack for representation here, that's for sure. Still, this has happened. Anyway, his lawyer said this all happened, by the way, in a case rejected last week by a magistrate judge. You know about that. Mr. Lemon said he was simply reporting as a journalist when he entered the city's church on January 18th to observe a demonstration against the immigration crackdown, which is also the word we don't want to use for it, in the area. We got to get a better one and commit it to memory. The protesters interrupted a service at the church where an immigration and customs enforcement official serves as a pastor and chanted ICE out. Well, you can see why lives were threatened by that. Afterward, the Trump administration sought to charge 8 people over the episode, including Mr. Lemon, citing a law that protects people seeking to participate in a service in a house of worship. And I mean, it's necessary to have such a law. It's just, you know, I guess when it was, I'll bet you that when it was being debated, or whether the renewal or the revamping of it, a recodification of it, I'm sure over the years there have been debate about whether or not it's overbroad. And they probably just said, yeah, but, you know, there's prosecutorial discretion. And, you know, in this country, we're pretty reasonable people. They're not going to go crazy and use it to overcharge people. But then they probably didn't see Trump coming at the time. Anyway, the magistrate judge who reviewed the evidence approved charges against only 3 of the people, rejecting the evidence against Mr. Lemon and others as insufficient. The Justice Department, believe it or not, that's what they call themselves, then petitioned a federal appeals court, well, stopping at the district court along the way, but later petitioned a federal appeals court to force the judge to issue the additional warrants, only to be denied. And here you are, everybody, all you brand new listeners who've been lured in by my 2 or 3 Blue Sky posts saying that you should listen to this show. I really have to do some more promotional work. Scott trying desperately to make me do that promotional work. It's okay, Scott. Don't worry about it. It's the right thing to do. And just notifying me that the posts are up and then using Blue Sky to do it so that I will pass the word on to others. Poor Scott doing, 10 times more promotional work than I am. It's going to change, Scott. I'm going to reduce it to about 5 times. You're going to do 5 times the work. But self-promotion is a difficult thing to do. Anyway, I want everybody to know this is the reason you listen to the show like this. We've explained to you already now I think 11 times today how that process worked and all the different layers that they went through. How many levels of thickness did they go through? At least 3. But you're reading the New York Times, the gold standard New York freaking Times just told you what happened here, right? What they tell you? Magistrate judge reviewed the evidence, said it was no good. Then the Justice Department petitioned a federal appeals court. Who's missing from this? I already told you. The district court. Why won't they tell you what it's like 6 more words to tell you what the actual process is. And then you'd be, properly informed and be able to figure stuff out. But they skip it. It's not hey, I'm not trying to make a federal case out of it. They are. But tell people, that's why it drives me crazy when today is a test vote in the Senate, or everybody knows it takes 60 votes to, come on now. You're doing everybody a disservice. Abby Lowell, a lawyer for Mr. Lemon, he's got more, vowed to fight the charges, which is good because they are paying him to fight the charges. Don Lemon was taken into custody by federal agents last night in Los Angeles, where he was covering the Grammy Awards, Mr. Lowell said in a statement. Don has been a journalist for 30 years, and his constitutionally protected work in Minneapolis was no different than what he has always done. Mr. Lowell added, this unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from the many crises facing this administration, like the Epstein files, will not stand. Don will fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court. And actually already has. He didn't really fight the charges. It's the charges fought the DOJ. But you know what happens when you fight the law. The law wins, even if the law is lawless. The Trump administration has pursued 2 criminal charges against the church protesters and Mr. Lemon, conspiring to deprive rights and interfering with someone's religious freedom in a house of worship. In the larger fight over the White House's aggressive immigration crackdown in that city, the Justice Department has pushed hard to charge people who participated in or were at the church protest. The administration posted arrest photos of the first arrests over the church protest, and a White House social media account posted a doctored photo, we didn't even get to that story, of one of the people to make it look as if she was crying. Yes, that is a huge story. It's linked in here. We should probably read it and take note of it. One of the protesters arrested, kind of stony-faced in the photo they took of her. And instead, the White House, I guess, went out of their way, presumably to run this through some kind of crazy AI filter and make it look like she was crying, which I'm not certain even what that's supposed to make. I guess it's supposed to make you look weak, and I don't know what. But if you've just been arrested by these federal authorities, I wouldn't blame you for crying a little bit. I'm not certain what that message is supposed to be. But what are you doing doctoring the photo? It doesn't matter what you do with it. You can make her look happy. It would be wrong. Mr. Lemon is scheduled to appear in federal court in Los Angeles on Friday. That's today. I guess he's got a couple hours coming to him before he has to come into court, because even if it's first thing in the morning, that's still a ways away in Los Angeles. But federal court in Los Angeles is where the appearance, I'm not certain how the criminal procedure thing goes here. Does he have to appear in Los Angeles because that's where they arrested him? Or does this give us some clue about where they got paper to arrest him with, or if they got paper? That is an open question. And in fact, I have seen it asked. Who asked it this morning? Jonathan Katz. Who I see all over Blue Sky all the time. Who is he? Author of Gangsters of Capitalism, and I guess also of The Big Truck That Went By, which sounds like a children's book, but probably isn't. The Racket News is where Jonathan M. Katz does his writing, and he's got a big following on Blue Sky and everything. And he says, this may be a naive question, but who arrested Don Lemon and on what authority? Paperwork, man. Trump and paperwork. You got to ask those questions. They may have something, but they may not. All right. As a matter of fact, another Blue Sky post on the question here is from Jared Holt. Who's Jared Holt? I got to find out. Jared Holt, senior researcher at Open Measures. Okay. And co-host of Posting Through It, a weekly podcast. In case you were wondering, Jared Holt says, hey, let's try this one in foreign correspondent voice. The real headline here: State security forces arrest journalist who covered protest against regime official. Yeah, well, that's actually it. All right. Well, continuing on with the New York Times story about Don Lemon's arrest. Based on what? I do not know. The administration posted those arrest photos, including the doctored one. Lemon was going to appear in federal court today. Now that he's been arrested, he's likely to challenge the prosecution's case by arguing that he was not protesting, but rather covering the event as a journalist. And because he's a big-time famous journalist, that should, under normal circumstances, matter in court. And I guess here's where we really have to pay attention to what's going on with poor Georgia Fort here. She's not a nationally famous journalist. And should she appear before judge and jury, they may not be as sympathetic to her plea that she's covered by the First Amendment as they would be to Don Lemon's. But hopefully Don Lemon will use his fame and fortune to speak up on her behalf. At any rate, once the protests started in the church, the article continues, we did an act of journalism, which was report on it and talk to the people involved, including the pastor, members of the church, and members of the organization, Mr. Lemon said in a recent video. That's it. That's called journalism. And that, I think, would help. That'd be pretty good evidence that you were there in a journalistic capacity if you were speaking. You weren't seeking to only cover one side of the story. Everybody knows that journalists cover both sides. Mr. Lemon, they note, now works as an independent journalist and has his own YouTube show. Oh, there you are. He was pushed out of CNN in 2023 after 17 years at the cable network amid criticism that he made sexist comments about women and aging, which I guess is true. I don't really remember the whole story there, but in case you're worried about any hero worship happening here, we don't frequently do that. But now you have evidence why you shouldn't. Hi, everyone. It's me, Commercial Guy, this time here to remind you that there are a number of ways you can support the show even without spending a dime, except for the dime that you spent on internet access so you could hear the show. Ignore that one. Anyway, I'm talking about feeding the evil algorithms that make the modern internet tick. When those YouTubers and TikTokers plead with you to smash that like button or subscribe so you never miss an episode, or even just leave a comment, it's because they know that it makes the algorithms more likely to recommend their content to other users. And they must know what they're talking about because their shows have millions of subscribers. And mostly those shows are terrible. We rule. So go find us on YouTube, find us on Libsyn, Stitcher, or Patreon, or Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Amazon, Pandora, and then like us, love us, post a comment, ring the bell, punch the clown, shock the monkey, whatever you're supposed to do on that platform to make that algorithm think we're cool. Thanks so much for helping us blindly walk into Skynet's oblivion, but maybe with a little extra coin in our pockets. Hey, where's that microphone? There it is. All right, I got the button working once again. Welcome back. You know where you're listening to. I keep reintroducing it. I guess it's like an old radio tradition to tell people, hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Dead Roots Radio. That's, I guess, if you're flipping around the stations in your car radio, which you're not. If you're tuned into a live stream or podcast, it's pretty clear you know where you are, but I don't know. That's just one of those things that traditions that carry on for no particular reason. And there's you could probably do a whole show just, although it would be a weekly show instead of a daily show, on crazy traditions that carry on for no particular reason just because the format is somewhat similar. I don't know. I find that interesting. But not as interesting as arresting Don Lemon, maybe without any indictment or warrant at all, as I was saying earlier in the show. And I will prove by reading to the conclusion of this New York Times article. There doesn't seem to be any information in most of the articles online, even though they got comment from his attorney, Abby Lowell, about the arrest. No information about, and they showed me an arrest warrant. Like, did they? I assume they did. Like, probably at some point you show up and you go to arrest Don Lemon at the Grammys, and they say, Don Lemon, you're under arrest. And he says, It's a movie, right? On what charges? Show me the warrant, something like that. I don't know. Or maybe they just, who knows? Maybe they just hit him over the head and pepper sprayed him and took him out of there. But I think we would have seen video of that by now. So where were we with this? Yes, Mr. Lemon, as you know, now works as an independent journalist. I'll repeat it in case I got drowned out somehow. The side note here, in case you're sitting around saying, yeah, this sucks, but isn't Don Lemon kind of, maybe a questionable figure or a jerk in some way in personal life? Maybe. I don't know the story, but here it is. He was pushed out of CNN. It's linked here. You can go and read it. That one I don't think we're going to spend any time on. We'll just suffice to say he was pushed out of CNN in 2023 after 17 years at the cable network amid criticism that he made sexist comments about women and aging. I guess you can judge that for yourself. Hey, maybe that's a hole in the reporting too, right? They forgot about the district court and describing the procedure and all of this. Maybe they forgot to let us know that, oh yeah, by the way, they looked into those charges and they were bogus or worse than once thought, or I don't know which, but maybe neither. Mr. Lemon has been a longtime critic, though, of President Trump dating back to his first term and frequently calls the president a liar. So, there's that. If you feel like playing a balancing game, I don't think there's any real reason to balance one versus the other. You can probably get your mind around both issues. Justice Department officials have vowed to prosecute protesters they claim have crossed the line from activity protected by the First Amendment to impeding law enforcement, or in the case of the church protest, violating others' rights. Never mind violating people's rights by firing tear gas canisters into their eye sockets. But for their part, demonstrators who have turned out in force in Minneapolis have asserted their rights are being violated themselves as they try to speak out against the crackdown. Yes, true. And I really wish I had I'm going to have to spend some time off the air figuring out a new word for crackdown. Tensions remain particularly high in Minneapolis after federal immigration agents fatally shot 2 protesters there. You know about them. Renee Good, a mother of 3, was behind the wheel of her car this month when an ICE agent fired at close range. Administration officials branded her a terrorist and claimed that she endangered the life of the agent. In a separate episode, Customs and Border Protection agents on Saturday shot and killed Alex Petti, an intensive care nurse. Videos from the scene undercut early claims by administration officials that Mr. Petti approached the agents brandishing a weapon. Mr. Trump suggested on Wednesday that he was willing to, quote, de-escalate the situation in Minneapolis without providing details. I should pause at this point and say, well, he did a little bit of both, and in fact, a lot of both. And it's probably a mistake for them to even pretend that he said he was willing to de-escalate, because he was asked not that much. I don't know whether it was in connection with the statement where he said, well, I'm thinking of de-escalating or whatever. But it was already predicted. I think by Wednesday, both days, we were basically saying, yeah, people on the ground are saying, sure, they moved Bovino out. They sent Homan nominally there. I don't know what Tom Homan has been doing there. I assume he's visiting every kava in the region looking for money in the bags, but hasn't done too much except make more inflammatory statements. But they meant for the shake-up there, and the word that Kristi Noem was on the bubble, et cetera, meant for it to be reflected in the media, this being a PR campaign, as a pivot away from the aggressive tactics or a de-escalation of some kind, or releasing the grip, the death grip on Minneapolis. But it hasn't been. People on the ground are saying, the roster of players has changed slightly, but the people who are running around shooting people, beating them up, gassing them, throwing things at them, whatever, shoving them to the ground for no particular reason, snatching them out of their cars and leaving the cars unattended in the middle of the street are still there and are still doing that. Greg Bovino has gone back to the Keebler tree, but everybody else is still there making trouble, essentially. And we don't know that they let him back into the Keebler tree. I know somebody made that comment about that when they moved him out of there. I hope they let him back in the tree. Anyway, the point is that the pressure is still on there, no doubt about that. And that I saw tape last night. I think Trump last night spent his time, and was forced, I guess, to spend time watching the actual Melania movie. I guess yesterday was the big premiere, and I think they had it at the Kennedy Center, which they call something else, the Kennedy Nobel Prize Senator, or something like that. Senator Kennedy. Yeah, it's named after Ted Kennedy. They did change the name just to spite people and see if they could get away with it. Anyway, he had to go there. I don't know if anybody was laying any odds on the online betting about whether or not he falls asleep in the middle of the movie. There's no way you could turn the lights out and put him in a comfy chair at night and he doesn't go to sleep. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. And at any rate, somebody got him on camera and they said, so, are you de-escalating in Minneapolis? And he's like, no, not at all. So why you run in the New York Times with, well, he said he was willing to de-escalate the situation without also adding, by the way, he also says, no, I'm not. I mean, maybe the timing happened late. I don't know, but this happened late and they got a whole story here. And having missed a step in the judicial process, I don't doubt that they just missed this too. Anyway, he suggested, Trump did, that he, according to this version of the story, that he was willing to de-escalate without providing details, including the detail that he was not willing to de-escalate. We'll say it that way. He replaced the Border Patrol official who has been the public face of the aggressive immigration efforts in Minneapolis, Gregory Bovino. I don't think I've ever seen him referred to as Gregory before. With his border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan has signaled a willingness to reach an agreement with local officials and draw down the thousands of federal agents sent there. I mean, I don't know what Homan's signal was or whether he generated his own, but it's linked here. But if he was pointing to Pam Bondi's willingness to reach an agreement, that would be, well, we'll agree to draw down the thousands of federal agents in Minneapolis if you give us your voter rolls for the state and also agree to cooperate with us, and local police will do their beating up, gassing, and arresting of people so we can go and terrorize a different city. And nobody's really particularly interested in that deal. But, there it is, just laid out half the story. Well, Homan has signaled a willingness to reach an agreement. Abject surrender would be a great agreement, according to Tom Homan, just that nobody's willing to talk to him about it. The arrest of Mr. Lemon it says here, come against the backdrop. So we're going to be Jamaican in this. The arrest of Mr. Lemon come against the backdrop of turmoil. I hope Lemon's not Jamaican, because then that would be considered insulting. It's just a typo. The arrest of Mr. Lemon comes against the backdrop of turmoil inside the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis, right? Oh, I forgot almost about that background. But we have that on record. You heard it here. At a tense meeting earlier this week, a number of prosecutors challenged the head of the office about the administration's decision not to pursue investigations of the shootings by federal agents. According to people familiar with the internal discussions, at least a half dozen prosecutors have resigned and more departures are expected. Attorney General, allegedly, Pam Bondi has called on other federal prosecutors' offices in the Midwest to send temporary reinforcements to help investigate and prosecute cases. And the article ends there, though it reminds me vaguely of something else. So what I wanted to... Oh, yeah, right. There's another... another prosecutorial issue floating around out there. Anyway, we'll see whether there's any more updates or anybody has seen the papers on this arrest. And we're just going to have to wait and see, I guess. Let's see if I left any other tabs open that were absolutely necessary to this story. I don't think so. Anyway, that is the breaking news story of the day. And, man, where else do I need to go? I mentioned that there was another strange prosecutor story out there. Oh, before I move on to that one, although that's really the next most relevant story. Although, oh, yes, that's right. I don't have enough stories about that because the first breaking coverage of it I saw was from Bloomberg, and it was paywalled, and I'm sure, All right, I promise we'll get onto that. But before I go there, I have to scroll past another story which is tangentially related, because I told you the very, very busy Patrick Schiltz, Chief Judge of the Federal District Court for the District of Minnesota, has, well, got a lot of irons in the fire, I guess. The Minnesota Star-Tribune coverage of this is where we'll go next, thanks to Sarah Nelson, the reporter who put this together. Minnesota federal judge, that's Patrick Schiltz, cancels contempt hearing requiring ICE director's appearance. I know. Where's my trombone sound? There we are. Gotta find a cleaner one and get that sting out of there. It really bothers me. Anyway, you know about this one, and you were waiting for his appearance in court today. He was supposed to appear in person in court today to show cause why he personally should not be held in contempt of court for ICE's failure to release, in this case, a particular detainee who had been ordered freed by the court before, and it just wasn't happening. So they said, all right, then in that case, show up on Friday and tell me why I shouldn't hold you personally in contempt of court for not obeying this order. But as should be the case with the sober federal courts working as normal, there was, I guess, this codicil to the order here that says, however, if before Friday you can prove to me that you have finally obeyed this order and released this detainee, then you don't have to come in on Friday. So allegedly, the ICE made this affirmation to the judge and satisfied him that this detainee had in fact been released. So he canceled the hearing that, what's his name? I forget the official's name, but it's got to be in here somewhere in this, you would think, in the coverage. Anyway, he didn't have to show up, he was in Washington. He would have to fly out there. And I'm sure rather than actually interrupt his day or delay his weekend, let this one particular detainee go. But the judge also made a point of listing, for those of us who say, what? You let him off the hook. Why? He did issue a hot memo listing some like 100 court orders that ICE has casually disobeyed along the way, which landed him in the position to say, all right, I've lost my patience. And on behalf of all the rest of the district courts in America, also lost my patience. We need to bring somebody in here and have him answer for this. Well, now it's down to 99, and he doesn't have to come into my courtroom to do it. But, if they have to do this one at a time this way, I guess they could. All right, here's the story. Minnesota chief federal judge cancels hearing requiring ICE director's appearance, tears into agency. It was Todd Lyons, I guess, is the name of the official who was on the hook here. ICE director Todd Lyons, is here pictured. This is not the judge that they used to illustrate. He's pictured being interviewed on the White House grounds on November 3rd. Okay, got it. Minnesota's chief federal judge, though, canceled the contempt hearing ordering the Trump administration's acting director, I didn't remember that he was an acting director, of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to appear in court while lambasting, that's my preferred pronunciation, federal immigration authorities over his concerns about how operations are being carried out in the state. U.S. Chief District Judge Patrick Schiltz, in a January 28th order, said his decision to scrap the Friday hearing requiring ICE Director Todd Lyons, and he is a liar at that, to testify. I don't know. I've never heard from him, but I bet he's lying pretty good. Todd Lyons had to testify. The order has now been scrapped, right? He doesn't have to show up and he does not. All right, I've ruined this sentence here. Judge Schiltz, in a January 28th order, that's 2 days ago, said his decision to scrap the Friday hearing does not change his frustrations over ICE violating court orders for detained immigrants. He attached a memo listing 96 court orders that he alleges ICE violated in 74 immigration cases, but said the extent of ICE's noncompliance is, quote, almost certainly, unquote, much higher. ICE has likely violated more court orders in January 2026 alone, he doesn't say alone, but than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence, Schultz wrote. Okay. Schultz canceled the hearing after ICE fulfilled the court's requirement to release. Now we get an answer. Remember, he was Juan TR to us earlier. He is Juan Hugo Tobe Robles. There's the TR. An Ecuadorian citizen who was previously found unjustly detained earlier this month. Schultz suggested he may call for contempt hearings in the future if violations continue. So he may do it over again, although I don't know whether anybody's going to believe him next time. But I think he did approach this soberly and properly, although it's disappointing that they didn't have to drag anybody into court. I was waiting to see that, and everybody's still like, well, are you ever going to do this, or are you going to let them taco out of everything? It's funny how that's now going to be a thing. No matter what your name is, when you chicken out, you're going to be tacoing. Anyway, interesting too, Ecuadorian citizen. I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that ICE agents attempted to breach the Ecuadorian consulate in Minneapolis just the other day. I think it's probably a coincidence. It doesn't look like they were looking for him, but at any rate, there you are. And I guess basically it's probably a testament to, I guess, the size of the Ecuadorian population in the Minneapolis area for them to even have a consulate there. In response, Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, the worst spokesperson the administration's got, and that's saying something, repeated the department's portrayal of Schultz as an activist judge and said the order does not change enforcement operations. And I'm sure they told us at some point somewhere, but I'm going to now look up. Usually they do this now in the reporting and tell you right off the bat who appointed Patrick Schultz, just to give some color to the situation. He's originally appointed, I guess he became chief judge in 2022, so that'd be a Biden appointment as chief. I don't know. Yeah, all right, well, let's see. He was, originally appointed to the bench by George W. Bush in 2006, and now I recall that I think they did, in fact, say that in one of the earlier articles that we discussed earlier in the week. But, okay, he was so appointed. That's something. Bipartisan, right? Appointed to the bench initially in 2006 by George W. Bush and elevated to chief by Joe Biden. I'm sorry, Joseph R. Biden Jr. This is the first time I've mentioned him, so there you go. I'm doing the New York Times thing. All right, back to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Is that right? Is that where I'm reading it? I did say that, didn't I? Yes. Okay. There we are. Tricia McLaughlin. I remember saying how much we disliked her. And here's her statement. Is it terrible? Let's find out. If DHS's behavior was so vile, why dismiss the order to appear? McLaughlin said in a statement. You see how terrible she is? They said, listen, you should show cause why you shouldn't be held in contempt unless you obviate the reason for me to hold you in contempt. So they did. And she says, yeah, well, if DHS's behavior was so vile, why would you, although that's a good question, actually. Maybe it's McLaughlin's best answer ever. Yeah. In fact, why don't you make Todd Lyons appear in court to show cause why he shouldn't be held in contempt for the other 95 orders that ICE has defied? Of course, they weren't related to this case, and he'd prefer that other judges who are still facing that frustration use the same leverage, and maybe they'll actually be able to get the people out of detention that way. But McLaughlin, like I said, one of the worst, to borrow a phrase. All right, so, it was so vile, how come you dismissed the order to appear? You should be thanking your lucky stars. In fact, why don't they make you appear, Tricia? And then we'll see whether or not you think it's a good idea to let you off the hook at the last minute. DHS will continue to enforce the laws of the United States. I guess they got to start sometime. Within all applicable constitutional guidelines. We will not be deterred by activists either in the streets or on the bench. See how bad she is. Schultz previously acknowledged his summoning of Lyons to personally appear is a highly unusual move, but he said the extent of ICE's violation of dozens of court orders prompted the move, and prior attempts to remedy the situation have failed. But now this one worked, so that's why you cancel it. The contempt hearing was supported by the attorney of the Ecuadorian man, the attorney, I guess, Graham Ojalá Barber, who asked the court for the proceeding to remain despite his client's release from a Texas facility. It's a good request. I believe the hardship Mr. Tobe Robles suffered as a result of the government's violations of this court's January 14th order are significant, and that they do warrant an individual contempt proceeding, Ojalá Barber said. Schultz recognized the request for the hearing to continue, but said he would not schedule a hearing as of January 28th. Schultz warned that he may call for future hearings requiring government officials to appear in his courtroom if ICE remains non-compliant. ICE is not a law unto itself, he said, and why not ask for Deputy Secretary Tricia McLaughlin to appear and be an activist in his courtroom there? Just a suggestion, but maybe the attorney was right. They should have continued with it. Even the government spokesperson and Deputy Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says that this hearing should have gone forward. So take her at her word. Reinstate it and invite her to appear as well. I mean, why not at this point? All right. I mentioned to you that there was another issue happening in court with prosecutors. We're up to like 6 or 7 billion U.S. attorneys and acting U.S. attorneys, I'm sure I've exaggerated the number, who it turns out are completely without credentials and ought not to be recognized as federal prosecutors at all, and every indictment that they sign ought to be dismissed, and we're seeing that happen. Well, okay, in half a dozen jurisdictions. But now there's another weird thing that we don't really know what the F and F is going on right here. But there's yesterday's story. This was related to the FBI raid in Fulton County, Georgia, about which I have even more craziness. So this whole show is going to mesh together, because that's how long it's going to take me to read these stories to you with all the asides. So the raid, you remember the story, and you might have asked the same question about the raid as you did about Don Lemon's arrest. On whose authority? Where did this come from? How come they're doing this? Who says? Where's the paper? Show me the warrant. They said they got one. And did we mention, I think, on the air yesterday? Maybe not. It might have been something I read afterwards, although I do feel like I read it on the air. I talked about it on Blue Sky afterwards, that they showed up with a warrant. And I'm sure somebody at the door of the facility said, "Oh, yeah, show me the warrant." And they showed the warrant, and they're like, that warrant is wrong. I don't know what the problem with it was, but apparently the first warrant they showed up with was deficient in some way. They had to go back to the judge and fix it, and they did, and they got a second warrant, and they came back. So I guess it was a minor problem, although things like that is usually like, we got the address wrong. It's got to be right. And the people at the address, that's the sort of thing you show them the warrant and they're like, that ain't right. I know what the address is here. That says you can go into my neighbor's house. I mean, go, I guess. I wish you wouldn't, but you can't come in here because that's not what the warrant says. The paper's got to be right. They went back, they fixed it, they came back. It's just funny because remember that this is the execution of a warrant in pursuit of a conspiracy theory that stretches back 5 and maybe even longer, 5 years, and they've been saying, "Oh, we're gonna, Trump, I'm your retribution, but I'm also my own retribution. When I go back, I'm gonna prosecute this like no one's ever prosecuted before, because no one has ever been prosecuted for this before, because it's made up." But 5 years he's been stewing about this. You can't get a warrant right? Like, please, Trump and paperwork, man. I am telling you. And I know different people had their hands on it, but come on. Clearly, the people executing this warrant knew that this was very important personally to the president. It's the only reason they'd be pulling this stupid stunt off in the first place. And they can't be bothered to get the address. I don't know, whatever it was. They can't be bothered to get it right. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it could be internal sabotage, but I don't think so. I think it's just stupidity. That's the most likely explanation. Occam is on the line. He says it's actually probably just the stupidity. So anyway, here's what happened, or what I found in Bloomberg. Ben Penn. I'm not kidding. That's the reporter's name. Ben Penn, his middle name, Sven, of course. Sven Penn, senior reporter at Bloomberg Law, Schmaw, I guess, has this story. Where the effing F did this whole thing come from if it's so desperately crazy? And remember, we hinted at, and now I have an article on just how much crazy crap is wrapped up in this conspiracy theory. How did they get a warrant for this? Do I want to do it the other way around? Maybe. All right, just for kicks, I'm going to go back out to Instapaper and pick up the ABC News story, and this deserves some additional commentary too. Oh, now we're going to be coming up to a break. This will ruin everything, or really keep you on the edge of your seat. Jonathan Karl reporting on this, and I find it interesting because he's bringing this stuff up because he's got a background in it. He wrote a book that covered all of this stuff, so he's very well aware of the craziness of the conspiracy theory here. But of course, we didn't hear it until he published a book, and then we don't hear about it until a day later, till the guy with the book reminds you, go buy my book. Trump posts discredited conspiracy theories following seizure of 2020 ballots in Georgia. The FBI on Wednesday seized original 2020 Fulton County voting records, he says in the subtitle. In the hours after FBI agents seized 2020 election ballots from an elections facility in Georgia on Wednesday, President Donald Trump posted a series of thoroughly discredited conspiracy theories about the 2020 presidential election and the 2016 presidential election, too. Don't forget that one. Fulton County officials said Wednesday the FBI seized original 2020 voting records while serving a search warrant at the county's Elections Hub and Operations Center. The FBI said they were conducting a court-authorized activity at the facility, but they would provide no further information, and they probably wouldn't ordinarily. And it was, in fact, they say, court-authorized. We'll get to that in a minute. Well, 2 minutes. Late Wednesday night, the president reposted to his social media platform a claim that Italian military satellites had been used to hack into U.S. voting machines to flip votes from Trump to Joe Biden. China reportedly coordinated the whole operation, the Post reads. That's not his voice. He's retweeting it. The CIA oversaw it. The FBI covered it up, all to install Biden as a puppet. What? Cuckoo. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The story developing even faster than I can keep up with it. Harmeet Dillon, by the way, the head of the Civil Rights Division in DOJ, believe it or not, is out there. She's out there tweeting. Apparently, Harmeet is retweeting Mike Davis, who, I don't even know, some wackadoodle influencer somewhere. But everybody's passing these around because Harmeet Dillon has now put the imprimatur of the Civil Rights Division on it, calling Pam Bondi is involved in this too. She's in the chain of events here, but she's not the one doing it. So Harmeet Dillon retweeting Mike Davis saying, calling Don Lemon one of today's Klansmen. This is a black fellow, in case you haven't been following along. He's a Klansman because he, as a journalist, was covering a protest at a church. And so I guess the word, by the way, I guess the word here they're trying to, well, he interrupted a church service. So that's kind of like the church bombings like that the Klan did. So it's a little bit like bombing. They did go in there and yell. But these are the guys, by the way, who have been screaming and tearing their hair out and crying that Tim Walz compared the situation in Minneapolis, where, generally speaking, the targeted communities, Hispanic communities, children are unable to get to school, basically hiding in their homes lest they be seized on their way to and from school by the federal authorities, and comparing the situation to Anne Frank hiding in an attic lest she go out on the street and be seized by the governing authorities there. And how dare you? You're minimizing the Holocaust. This is generally that anytime anybody compares anything that has to do with the World War II and the Holocaust, you're minimizing the Holocaust. Some people will say that. Some people will say no. The comparison is apt, but they're crying that it's horrific to even make the suggestion that there's any parallel there. But P.S. Don Lemon, he went into a church and they didn't want him there, so it's a little bit like bombing and killing everybody in the church. It's a pretty good comparison, wouldn't you say? All right, well, I'll have to put that aside to show you how crazy it is. Although if you're watching social media, you're already seeing it. Where were we? Oh, yes, right. Jonathan Karl reporting that everybody is completely insane. Okay, I hinted at this. It was clear to us yesterday as we were reading between the lines about what was being reported that this was happening. And I don't think we had seen that Trump himself was retweeting these theories. But if you were a normie reading the news yesterday, you probably found yourself rather confused about the raid. Although you surely know that Trump has always said that the 2020 election was stolen from me. And you remember the call to Brad Raffensperger and you're like rolling your eyes. I can't believe he's trying to do this. But the part about Italian military satellites and Sidney Powell's crazy theory, they got her kicked her stupid ass out of the White House even in 2020 for all this nonsense. You might not have picked that up the first time around. But we tried to remind you of this. Now, Jonathan Karl could have reminded you of this. But the thing is, you shouldn't need reminding of this. It should be on everybody's lips. Everybody should know just how crazy Trump world really is. But they don't, because when stuff happens and reporters find out, they wait to write books until 4 years after the fact. And then nobody reads the book. And then we're stuck having to do things this way and unravel them on the podcast instead. So Jonathan Karl, as I said, reporting that late Wednesday night, the president reposted to his social media platform a claim that Italian military satellites names are Mario, Luigi. I think it could have been Wario doing this one. Italian military satellites have been used to hack into U.S. voting machines to flip votes from Trump to Biden. And by the way, something China. China has reportedly coordinated the whole operation. The Post reads, the CIA oversaw it, the FBI covered it up, all to install Biden as a puppet. And I just have to say, look, the Biden administration was a brief respite, one more return to the age of international cooperation. China cooperated with Italy, by the way, also Venezuela gets into the act. Hugo Chavez from the afterlife as well. And not only international coordination, but interplanar coordination as well. And the CIA oversaw the whole thing. The CIA was giving orders to Italy and China. Now, by the way, I like that too. The CIA oversaw it. China coordinated. Wait a minute. Who did... Oversaw, coordinated. What's that? The rivalry here between the CIA and China. Oh, remarkable. But bringing in Italy and Venezuela and Hades is really quite an achievement. All covered up, of course, by the FBI, who is now conducting the raid and whatever. It's impossible. It's insane. It doesn't even hold together internally. And the president of the United States is bringing this out. By the way, it was Wednesday night. Okay, so Thursday night he was silent because he had to sit captive in the theater to watch the Melania movie. That was just one of a flurry of posts and reposts by Trump making discredited claims about the 2020 election, directly tying the allegations to the FBI's seizure of ballots on Wednesday. I mean, he laid it all out. The reason we're doing this is I'm completely cuckoo. That's basically what it comes down to. This is only the beginning, Trump said, reposting other posts about the FBI's action in Georgia. Prosecutions are coming. But I mean, how long has he been saying that? Lock her up since 2016. The development comes after Trump has repeatedly made baseless claims that there was voter fraud in the 2020 election, specifically in Georgia, that contributed to his election loss. Georgia officials audited and certified the results following the election, and numerous lawsuits challenging the election results in that state, and others, by the way, were rejected by the courts. But of course, we learned today in Don Lemon's case that being rejected by the courts, so what? They were rejected by the courts. Stupid courts. Do what you want. Among the statements posted and reposted by Trump following the FBI's actions in Georgia is one on the 2016 election that falsely claims that Barack Hussein Obama falsified intelligence and conspired with foreign powers, not one, not two, not three, but 4 times to overthrow the United States government in 2016. Now, this was almost assuredly, that's too long of a sentence for him to have authored himself. He does ramble on, but this is probably a reposting rather than his own original. I should probably not have done it in his voice, but it's there. And by the way, you don't rarely see that kind of constraint. Not 1, not 2. Usually then people say, but 3 times. Or if you want it to be, if the answer is 4, people then start on 2. I think the rule of 3s here is what it applies. Not 2, not 3, but 4 times. But this one got all 4. Not 1, not 2, not 3. Imagine if it had been like 167 times. What a long post that would have been. In addition to being baseless, the claim ignores the fact that Obama was president in 2016. So if he tried to overthrow the government, he would have been overthrowing himself. But that's not impossible. We learned about the autogolpes, the autogolpe concept from Greg years ago. Remember, it was a threat to overthrow the United States government in 2020, and Trump was nominally at the head of that government. But usually it's to keep yourself in power and not to put a successor in power, though I suppose it's entirely possible. Anyway, the conspiracy theory about the Italian military satellites, it's not the new. In 2021, then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, haven't heard from him in a while, directed both the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense to look into the matter. As documented in my 2021 book, Betrayal, the Final Act of the Trump Show, plugs the book in there, the conspiracy theory, Jonathan Karl tells us, was brought to the White House by a woman who went by several aliases. Oh, I thought you were going to Sidney Powell in this, but guess what? It's a different woman entirely. I wonder if it's the woman we read about the other day who had those weird hallucinations, and I had a dream where I was internally decapitated, and then the wind talked to me. I'm not certain it's the same person. It doesn't say here. It just says that she went by several aliases, including the heiress. I don't know. Is that dramatic music moment? The heiress. I don't know. Or maybe the heiress is coming with instructions for all of us.
Well, what the hell are we supposed to do, you moron?
What are we supposed to do? You tell us. We're actually trying to listen to you this time. This stupid satellite conspiracy was brought to you by the heiress. This heiress was apparently known at the Pentagon. Why? For her claimed ties to Somali pirates, which I don't know whether this is intentionally tying everything in Minneapolis that revolves around Trump's attack on Somali Americans. Is that just weird coincidence or what? I don't know. The heiress allegedly claimed ties to Somali pirates. So what? But there you have it. She passed her material off to a National Security Council official at a supermarket parking lot in Arlington. And I assume here we mean Arlington, Virginia, not Arlington, Texas. The heiress claims a connection both to Somali pirates and to Dallas Cowboys. I don't know why that is, but that's what happened. What? And it's great for effect. Jonathan Karl really knows how to make it look completely insane by tying all of this stuff together. Somali pirate, she's an heir, says she's the heiress, and she handed over the information to somebody at a parking lot in Arlington. What supermarket, I'm wondering? Is it Whole Foods? Because that really, that scans differently than, say, Safeway. I don't know. The Italian spy satellite theory was just one of many unsubstantiated allegations made about the 2020 elections by Trump and his supporters. At a Trump campaign press conference in November 2020, lawyer Sidney Powell, there she is, infamously claimed that voting machines had been rigged using software that was, quote, created at the direction of Hugo Chavez. This was an especially extravagant claim. Extravagant. Because Chavez, the former leader of Venezuela, had died 3 years earlier. What we didn't find out, though, and what nobody will tell you, is that Hugo Chavez died in a tragic voting machine explosion. Obviously, right? And originally, I thought a kiln explosion. That was what they were trying to cover it up with. But yeah, as you know, he opened the nuclear power plant, mini nuclear power plant inside a voting machine, and it exploded and killed him. What the? I mean, by the way, this insane cuckoo bird, Sidney Powell, you may recall briefly, there was a moment there at the end of 2020 when it looked like Trump was going to leave her behind embedded in the federal government, and it would have taken Merrick Garland 9 years to get her out of there, I'm sure. Leave her behind as a special prosecutor, special counsel to investigate these charges. He ended up not doing it. I don't really know what magic Patsy Baloney used to do it. Hopefully, loaded up his Diet Coke with laxative, and Trump couldn't stick around long enough to give the order. It's a good trick, by the way. But he ended up not doing it. But basically, this is now coming to fruition. This is what she wanted to happen in 2020. And now it's happening. And I can't believe it. It's insane. In 2023, Powell pleaded guilty to state charges of conspiracy to commit intentional interference with performance of election duties in Georgia and agreed to serve 6 years of probation and pay a $6,000 fine. And they should have, instead, I don't know what, they should have locked her in an undersea chamber, an undersea volcano. But they didn't. She's on probation, I guess, still now. And for this, and she's doing her happy dance somewhere, finding out, I'll finally be vindicated. It's just another one of those every accusation is a confession things. But just like Tina Peters, she thinks this whole thing is going to vindicate her, and she's just delusional, and no one will stop her. And now it appears that Sidney Powell is back. Jonathan Karl concludes. In a post on X Thursday morning, DOJ official Ed effing Martin posted a picture of himself with Powell writing, quote, "Good morning, America. How are you?" And so, by the way, they should be sued for copyright infringement on that. So there you go. Good morning, America. How are you? Don't you know me? I'm an insane lunatic, and I'm here to wreck America. I can't believe what's going on here. Now, this was all supposed to be prelude to our discussion of what happened in Georgia and why. So now let me scroll back down to the Bloomberg report here, which was behind the paywall. Here we are. How does the FBI find itself legally? They say we're executing a court-sanctioned action here. What court? Why? When? How? All right. The Bloomberg Law folks, and remember which folks it was, Ben Sven Penn. I don't think his middle name is Sven. In case some people don't hear the sarcasm marks there. Bondi hands St. Louis prosecutor. We did mention this yesterday. Like, what happened here? Wasn't the search warrant was applied for and authorized out of St. Louis, Missouri, and everyone said, why there? Why not the Northern District of Georgia? Why the Eastern District of Missouri instead? The St. Louis-based U.S. attorney overseeing the FBI search warrant executed on Fulton County's election office on Wednesday received a special appointment by Attorney General Pam Bondi, who allegedly is non-crazy, but apparently is, to investigate election integrity cases nationwide, said two people familiar with the matter. There is a mechanism by which you can do this. It's true, but this is being, it's being overused, to say the very least, by the Trump administration. And they threatened to use a similar statute to try to give Ed Martin nationwide authority for all sorts of investigations, to pursue the Letitia James thing. I think this is the statute under which they claim that he's got a nationwide remit to investigate weaponization of the Department of Justice, which is hilarious because, as every accusation is a confession, that's exactly what they're doing. Remember, we mentioned, because he had the funny name, Thomas Albus, and decided to call him Thomas Albus Dumbledore. Thomas Albus, the Trump-appointed chief prosecutor for the Eastern District of Missouri, and we can get into that appointment and wonder about that one too. I don't think he is Senate confirmed at this point. I think he's there in an interim rather than acting capacity, but it's questionable, like, how old is that appointment? Because remember, those things are limited. Thomas Albus, the Trump-appointed chief prosecutor in the Eastern District of Missouri, appeared on the FBI's court-approved warrant rather than the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. And that warrant enabled agents to seize records from the Atlanta government building at the center of the president's discredited 2020 election conspiracy. Side note, Thomas Albus's first attempt at the warrant that enabled agents to seize records didn't work, and didn't, in fact, enable agents to seize records. It was his second try at the warrant that enabled agents to seize those records. Bondi had previously handed, allegedly. I don't see any record of it anywhere. I don't know what you have to do to comply with the statute, but Bondi, it is claimed, had previously handed Albus, maybe 5 minutes before. Albus, by the way, was formerly the top assistant to then Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt, who, as I recall, is he the one that was, I can't remember what's up with him. Is he the one who ended up in the Senate, or is he the one? Yeah, he did. You forget that he's in the Senate, but he's the one that stepped in right after they got rid of, what's his name, like Greidens, right? Wasn't he gonna take this path? And then he found himself, oh, surprise, he's a Republican. He found himself wound up in sexual misconduct and assault charges along the way. And Eric Schmitt ran in to collect the prize instead. Anyway, Eric Schmitt's former top assistant is Albus Dumbledore here in the Eastern District of Missouri. Now, it's claimed that she had previously handed Albus authority to conduct voter fraud probes anywhere in the U.S. under a statutorily permitted designation, say these individuals, who were, of course, granted anonymity so that they didn't get killed by activists, by, Trump thugs. The 28 U.S. Code Section 515 appointment allows Albus to coordinate civil and criminal cases, including grand jury proceedings in all 94 U.S. attorney districts. There is such a section. 28 U.S. Code Section 515 exists. It's a real thing. There's some questions we could have about how it operates, and we might want to ask those questions very shortly. But that's a real section of code, in case you were wondering. Spokespeople, it came up earlier in our, weeks ago, when, I don't know whether it was Alina Habba or Lindsay Halligan that it applied to. They were trying to extend their appointments when it looked like they had fouled up their first attempts at keeping them in office, and they said, all right, well, you're 180 days as acting U.S. attorney, and I can't remember, one of them is 180 days, one of them is 210 days. I think interim might be longer, 210 possibly. Anyway, when their appointments were expiring and they hadn't been confirmed by the Senate, the thinking was there were two different plans. One of them, the crazier, well, we'll make her the first assistant U.S. attorney fire the existing first assistant, make her the first assistant, and then with the U.S. Attorney job vacant, the Vacancies Act would normally point to the first assistant to fill the vacant U.S. Attorney slot as in an acting capacity. But you can't, they said you can't just bootstrap the same person into this thing over and over again, or else there's no reason to ever submit a name to the Senate. You remember that happening in New Jersey, I think, with Alina Habba. And then the second theory was, well, and I think they were going to do this with Halligan, the Attorney General can appoint them a special prosecutor, essentially. A special attorney, I think, was the title, for some specific type of investigation or one investigation in particular, whatever remit you want to hand them. And that would be enough to keep them in a position of power, just not the position of U.S. Attorney for whatever district. Anyway, so yes, 28 U.S. Code Section 515 is the one they're talking about. That's what does it. Spokespeople at DOJ headquarters and the St. Louis U.S. Attorney's Office didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. It's unclear how many other ongoing investigations Albus is helming under this authority. Could be 1, could be 100. I'll tell you later. Albus's previously unreported role, that's what made it a surprise to everybody. Why is this guy involved in all this? And you say Pam Bondi handed him this authority. When? And did she? And has anybody seen the paper on it? The section of code, by the way, refers specifically to you're having to take an oath to take up this special post. Did he take that oath? Or will they say, well, his oath that he took when he stepped into the role originally of acting U.S. Attorney or interim U.S. Attorney or whatever it is, that should apply. Or it might even be the same oath. But I don't know. If you're entering a different office, you should take the oath for that office. You just can't just say, well, I took an oath once. Isn't that enough? All right. Well, Albus's previously unreported role shows the Justice Department's coordinated efforts, I guess you could say coordinated, to relitigate President Donald Trump's false claims that the ballot tampering in Fulton County and elsewhere cost them the 2020 election. DOJ's Civil Rights Division, who's out there telling people that Don Lemon is a Klansman, has sued multiple states to compel them to hand over voter registration rolls. And of course, we just saw the other day Pam Bondi saying, nice Minneapolis you got there. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to it, but if you had something over here, like say your voter rolls, that would end up instead over here, say my pocket, then I'd stop doing this to you. Multiple outlets reported Wednesday that the FBI searched the Fulton County election office and retrieved ballots from the 2020 election. The New York Times, citing a copy of the search warrant, reported that it involved federal laws barring destruction of election-related records and procuring fraudulent voter registration and votes. Albus was confirmed as a U.S. attorney in December after serving in the role on an interim basis. Okay. So, it's being alleged here. I don't know if it's true and they got the report right, but I guess the thing we're supposed to take away from this is that Albus is a fully Senate-approved U.S. attorney for the Eastern District starting in December. Although I did see yesterday someone else saying, I think actually that might not have gone through yet, or maybe they just didn't notice that had gone through if it's a late breaking development. December. But this person on social media, I guess, remembers Albus having been installed on an interim basis and saying they're 181 days into the interim appointment. Is this person still validly serving in this interim role as U.S. attorney? I don't know if it would matter if he was claiming that he was doing this under authority of his appointment as special attorney, which would be probably brand new. That might be okay. Although, again, I'm not so certain that courts will okay the idea of just sort of chaining together a flimsy series of interim appointments to different offices and bypassing their decision about Alina Habba that way. Anyway, we'll check that out over the break and see if there's a record of his confirmation in December. He worked, by way of background, at Bryan Cave, the law firm, and then in the office as an assistant U.S. attorney from 2002 to 2019, before joining the Missouri Attorney General's office as Schmidt's first assistant. Not the first assistant he ever hired, but, the title of first assistant. He was sworn in as a St. Louis County Circuit Judge. Oh, boy. I didn't even realize that. In 2020, Schmidt and other GOP attorneys general, backed a Texas lawsuit seeking to overturn the 2020 election results that was tossed by the U.S. Supreme Court. In a Senate floor speech in December, Schmidt, who has served as a Republican senator from Missouri since 2023, said Albus he had a big record. Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, one crisp $1 bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I tell you what, I have not found the confirmation I was looking for Thomas Albus. I got distracted. Now, I'll tell you why. I believe he's been nominated, and in fact, I can tell you, here's the nomination. Executive nominations received by the Senate in the Congressional Record of July 30th, 2025. Thomas Albus of Missouri to be United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri for the term of 4 years. All right. Well, I'll have to look and see whether there was any action on that nomination or not. The story we were reading was from where? Bloomberg. Is that right? And that says that he was, I guess, confirmed to the position in December. But anyway, I went to look, right? So I was like, well, I should look at the Wikipedia entry for the guy if he's got one, and they'll have a date that it's alleged he was confirmed to the appointment, if true, and then I can look that up. And instead, searching Thomas Albus Wiki, I wanted to go to the Wikipedia entry for the guy. I hit a different Thomas Albus and Wiki, different wiki entirely, Muppet Wiki. I didn't even know there was a Muppet Wiki, but it doesn't surprise me. There's lots of fandom wikis for all sorts of things, interesting entertainment stuff. Thomas Albus is a name shared, I guess, by the maybe U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri and a German voice actor who has been heard in multiple Muppet dubs, often as, I guess, the Muppet character with whom I'm not familiar, Sal Manila. Salmonella is, according to the Muppet Wiki, the primate, flunky, bodyguard, and all-purpose sidekick to Johnny Fiamma. Who? What? Where? I mean, I like the Muppets and all, but what's... The puppet used for Sal originated as a generic unclothed monkey. Unclothed. Performing a solo line in the opening song from Muppet Treasure Island. He was performed in this instance by Jerry Nelson. But Thomas Albus covered the German dub of Muppet Treasure Island, I guess. The monkey was subsequently refitted with a vest and tie. And I can't believe I'm covering this. But then, it's either this or Italian Satellites. You tell me what's crazier. The monkey was subsequently refitted with a vest and tie and made his debut as Sal Manella in Muppets Tonight. Sal, who has since been performed by Brian Henson, is devoted to Johnny, though some of his ideas to promote Johnny's career are a bit harebrained. Does anybody know what this is about? I don't, but it's allegedly a real thing. It's just something I haven't followed. Thomas Albus, though, is the German voice actor who dubs it in German, I guess, is what we're saying. He's not the voice actor who did the original voice. He did the German version of it. Albus has dubbed Jamie Foxx in Booty Call. They don't look alike. But, the German version of Booty Call, that must be something. Is it better in the dubbed German? Or does it have to be original German in order for it to be better? Albus has dubbed Jamie Foxx, Patrick Warburton in Men in Black 2, the important German version of that. Michael Clark Duncan in Cross. There's lots. It goes on and on. These are his credits. And he's got lots of Muppet dubbing credits, too. He's not just Salmonella. He's also Mikey the cameraman and guard number 2 in Muppets from Space. Muppets aus dem All. I don't know how to say this in German. And then some really long ones. Das größte Muppet Weihnachtsspektakel. Weihnachtsspektakel. Aller Seiten. It's a very Muppet Christmas movie. Is what there's Salmonella in that too. Also Crow, Crazy Harry's, and others in the Muppets Wizard of Oz. Oh, Wizard of Oz. See, we are tying things together here. Look, he's got a lot. That's not the guy, but I just thought you should know in case you're like, who issued this arrest warrant? Who issued this search warrant? Thomas Albus. Thomas Albus of German Muppet dubbing fame? No, but I'm impressed that you knew that. Okay, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Missouri, not Virginia, that's Lindsay Halligan, has a page for the guy. It says his current page, maybe it just hasn't been updated. Thomas C. Albus was sworn in as interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri on August 1st, 2025, which I guess is where people started counting days from there. August. How many days has it been since August 1, 2025? The AI answer is 182 days, which accounts for the extra day that it's been since I saw someone saying it was 181. Does it matter? For an interim U.S. attorney, I think the interim one was the 210, so it shouldn't. But again, they claim now in Bloomberg that he's confirmed. From 2020, and then this is the background from 2022 or 2002 to 2019, he was in that office. Remember, we were reading Eric Schmidt's floor speech about his nomination, in which he said Albus had appeared in nearly 900 federal criminal prosecutions, not of himself. He wasn't the defendant. He was the prosecutor. And civil matters, and tried 15 cases to verdict. That's not a whole lot for a guy who was in the U.S. Attorney's Office for 17 years, but okay. Tom, he says, is sharp, serious, and a lifelong proponent of law and order, a career lawman, Schmidt said. I don't know how many times you got to appear in court to be taken seriously, but at the very least, you could insist, if you are now the Senate-confirmed U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri, you could insist that they update the website. So it's a little unclear what's going on here. Other background, might it be of some interest? 2002 to 2019, prosecuted white-collar, tax, public corruption, and other cases for the U.S. Attorney's Office. In 2019, he joined the Missouri Attorney General's office, becoming first assistant to then Attorney General Eric Schmidt. In 2020, Mr. Albus was sworn in as a St. Louis County Circuit Judge, having been appointed by Missouri Governor Michael Parsons. So things started to change for him around 2019. 2019, he goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office. 2020, he becomes a judge. Mr. Albus is a native of St. Louis County, Missouri. He graduated from Georgetown University in 1994 and the University of Missouri Law School in 1997. He then clerked for the late Lawrence G. Crahan on the Missouri Court of Appeals and for Judge John C. Holstein on the Missouri Supreme Court. Following that, he worked in the litigation department of what is now Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner in St. Louis. So, a nice, normal-looking career path. Nothing looks that extraordinary. The question, though, is where could I find any action on his confirmation as U.S. Attorney if it exists? I see the nominations. The question is whether there's any confirmation. I guess I could do this. One quick and dirty way of looking is I could look at the executive calendar in the Senate and see whether there's any pending nomination for him, which would answer the question of have they confirmed him. If he was definitely nominated, then if he's not on here, it would be, I guess, either because the nomination was withdrawn, which I don't think is the case, or he was, in fact, confirmed. So I don't know. I better take a look. There's nothing in the way of treaties pending. Nominations, Department of Justice. I don't see any pending. Well, not on this page. This is for Colorado Assistant Attorney General. Department of Justice, he's not under this one either. Judiciary, he wouldn't be in that. Not there. Department of State, I'm going to keep scrolling. They sometimes repeat. But I don't see any pending nomination for him under the Justice Department. So it may actually be the case that he was confirmed in December. But if he's also being sworn in as a special or nominated as a special attorney, there should be some paperwork on that too. And Bondi should be asked to produce it, even though the damage has been done. They've seized these boxes. You should go back, and I'm sure, well, I'm not sure, but I guess someone from Fulton County will ask to, see the authority under which Albus is said to have applied for this search warrant. It's a mess, people. That's all I can tell you at this point. All right. I think we've gotten to all of those loose ends. Although, what else was next in all of this? I got another story that sort of relates to this, but I guess Jonathan Karl kind of covered it. But I did have a Mother Jones short-looking blurb about this, thanks to Katie Herkenroder. Am I pronouncing it right? Herch. It could be Herchenroder. Herchenroeder. Sounds like a German last name, maybe dubbed by the other Thomas Albus at some point. Katie Herkenroder writes in Mother Jones, Trump is still posting about arresting Obama and prosecuting election workers. The president's response to intense national backlash over ICE, post through it. Just to reemphasize, the president of the United States, like this unstable. This is where he's spending his time. Amid multiple national crises, President Donald Trump spent Thursday morning posting, not for the first time, about how his predecessor Barack Obama should be arrested and how Georgia election workers should be prosecuted, in both cases citing unsubstantiated claims. And in fact, in the case of the Georgia election workers, citing a case that was so poorly put together and so unfounded that the people who brought the case or attempted to bring the case ended up getting prosecuted for bringing the case. Or not prosecuted, but sued civilly. And Rudy Giuliani, who just showed up the other day, like dressed in a wild mustard-colored suit somehow on television. I don't know how this happened, but he ended up losing, millions of dollars to the Georgia election workers he tried to have prosecuted. Just as a reminder, Trump's fixations on going after Obama and Georgia aren't new, but they now come at a moment of intense backlash across the country over his administration's violent campaign targeting both immigrants and citizens in Minneapolis and nationwide, and also the goddamn Epstein files. Trump shared a invading Venezuela and threatening to invade Greenland and breaking up NATO and a couple of other things. Trump shared a screenshot of a breaking social media post that accused the former... How do you make a breaking post? But that's what they put in the post. Breaking. It accused the former president of attempting a coup and working with CIA agents to manufacture false intelligence and erode Americans' confidence in our democracy and President Trump's landslide victory in 2016, which it wasn't. He lost the popular vote. In that election, Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by a margin of nearly 3 million. In another post sharing a screenshot, Trump switched to talking about 2020. Trump won big, crooked election, he wrote over a post about the Georgia election results. During his second run for the presidency as a Republican, Trump lost the nation and the state of Georgia. In more than 5 years since, Trump has repeatedly falsely claimed that he won the state and attempted to interfere with election results, as when in 2021 Trump pressured Georgia's Republican Secretary of State Brett Raffensperger in a phone call to find 11,780 votes. The latest escalation took place Wednesday when the Federal Bureau of Investigation executed a warrant in Fulton County, Georgia, to seize records from the 2020 presidential vote in a move that legal experts called a historic attack on democratic norms. That search happened not far from the Fulton County Jail, where Trump was booked and had his mugshot taken in 2023 after being indicted by the county's district attorney, Fani Willis, on charges related to efforts to overturn the 2020 vote in Georgia. And we know what happened to that one. And it's fair game to be annoyed at the outcome and cast blame in several different directions. Okay, I now need to update you because it's the end of the week and almost the end of the validity of the current continuing resolution funding the government. Yes, we are, what are we, 12? It's almost 11 o'clock. At 11, we'll be 13 hours away from the expiration of federal government funding. And yet we're told there's a deal. And the deal is, this almost should have been the lead story. Yesterday, well, I don't know that it matters that there's a deal because you're not going to have the House in place to approve its side of the deal. So there will be a shutdown. I mean, I think that's a done deal. I don't know if they can engineer something to make things. I don't think they can make things work. The House could have made things work if it wanted to, but they wanted to jam the Senate. I think they could have left behind both a minibus and they could have spent another couple of hours. It would have taken them 2 or 3 hours to get through the votes, but they could have passed all of the bills that are wrapped up in it individually. Although I guess I don't know for sure. Maybe it only passed successfully because it was a package, but if they really were proud of their product, they could have passed them individually too, to give the Senate the flexibility to pass 5 out of the 6 or 4 out of the 5 or whatever it is, if necessary, without causing a shutdown. But they do want to cause a shutdown. Anyway, so I don't think there's any way for them to do this and to get it right. And the Senate might not even vote before they shut down because they tried yesterday and it didn't work. So the deal is that they are, in fact, going to separate out the DHS appropriations bill from the package and deal with it separately. They'll pass the other 5, I think, bills as a package and hold the DHS bill in abeyance. They'll set it aside and pass a short-term 2-week continuing resolution that will continue to fund the Department of Homeland Security at current levels, and I think as is, which is itself not great, though they may also have won some concessions. I know that they were looking for some concessions on ICE restrictions in exchange for continued funding. I don't know if it's in the 2-week bill, and this is what Rosa DeLauro was warning about. If you are forced to fund DHS on a continuing resolution, if it's a clean continuing resolution, which they might insist on, even a short-term one, it means things go on as is, which is terrible. And she was saying, at least in our version of the minibus package, we've got some restrictions on ICE and some clawing back of some funding, not all of it, not nearly enough, maybe not even enough to make a dent, given how much money was in the one big beautiful bill, which they should be working on rescinding, of course. But anyway, so as soon as they announced that there was a deal, this deal is, remember that the ask was, at a minimum, we need you to take the DHS funding out of this package. I'm not voting for it. We will shut down the rest of the government rather than fund DHS as written right now in the Senate. That's what people wanted to see done. And then they made the deal, and the deal is we're going to do that. But everybody online, they're very sensitive about things. Things are crazy right now. I can understand the sensitivity. Saw Schumer made a deal and went ballistic. How dare he caved. They started saying Sacco would become the new terminology. Not taco, but Sacco. Schumer always chickens out. Schumer caved. And some very big name accounts on social media said exactly that. And then people went crazy. And he attached, I forget exactly who it was, but he attached a New York Times article that described the deal accurately, like I've described the deal to you. I mean, I took the description from them, but because it was the New York Times, it's behind a paywall, and maybe not everybody could actually read the thing. And some people can read it and not understand it. And we're supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to be filling that role, explaining these things to you. And they weren't reading it, and they were mad because Schumer. But in reality, the ask was, please strip out the DHS funding and set that aside so we can work on it. And I'm sure they're mad about there being a continuing resolution. You're funding it. Okay, if it's for 2 weeks, but still 2 weeks. Why are you funding it at all? Well, again, remember, if there was no continuing resolution funding and it's the entire Department of Homeland Security. So yeah, that would also shut down the Coast Guard and TSA. And there's all that pressure. But even if it was simply ICE, remember that the one big beautiful bill has all the money they could ever need. So shutting them down and not extending the funding for the rest of the DHS for 2 weeks. Two weeks. That's it. 2 weeks. We'll see what happens. Would still have resulted in ICE operating unfettered. Only TSA and the Coast Guard and other offices would be inconvenienced. So everybody vented at Schumer and said, rah, rah, rah. But he's doing what he said they were looking for. I don't know if I have I probably do have the New York Times report on it handy, but I'm looking to see whether it is in fact handy. I don't know, not as handy as I think, but NPR has the story. But like I said, I'll provide that as a link. Senate to move ahead with spending deal, but shutdown appears inevitable is the NPR story's title. And it will describe, you'll see, it describes things as I've told you, what the deal actually is. It's really not that bad. I think the Republicans wanted a longer term CR for DHS. And Democrats said 2 weeks is the longest we'll go. We want to have those negotiations right now. And they said, okay, because they weren't able to move the full package together. They tried and failed. Then they tried to move the deal package, and apparently Lindsey Graham got in the way of that. Well, either way, I understand that Lindsey Graham's objection was, I want to see reinserted in this 5-bill package the deal we had negotiated for ourselves, meaning literally the senators themselves before, and it got stripped out in the House, I guess. Remember that they put in a provision that said senators, not members of Congress, but senators who'd had their phones seized in the January 6th investigation were entitled to sue the federal government for $500 million. And of course, Trump would order them to settle and they'd get the $500 million payoff. I want that back in as the price of my letting this deal go forward. So I don't know how well that'll reflect on Lindsey Graham, but what does he care? Anyway, yeah. So speaking of which, there's also a new lawsuit filed by Trump, I guess, personally, and maybe from his campaign, or maybe for the Trump organization as well. He's suing the IRS, and I forget who else, for the leak, as he says, of his tax documents. And he wants, what, this time $10 billion he's asking for. And it's another one of those suits that sets up as Trump is suing his own federal government, and they're under his thumb, and he will obviously order the quote-unquote defendants in this case to settle with him and agree to pay him the $10 million. Or maybe for that matter, he gets greedier. You know what? You only asked for $10 million, but we're willing to settle. We're so happy you're settling, we're going to give you an extra $10 billion. Here's $20 billion from the Treasury for you personally. Just a straight transfer from the Treasury to Donald Trump's pockets. That's what's coming next. And I know people, there were some reflexive things like, oh yeah, Donald Trump is getting involved in another civil lawsuit. Great, I can't wait for discovery. Well, we might not get that since he's both defendant and prosecutor, not prosecutor, but defendant and plaintiff. It'll probably work out in his favor. All right. What other crazy things did I want to say? Oh, well, here's a short story that I just wanted to share with you. From where? Do I know this story? This outlet? Is it Sahan Journal? Is that a local Minneapolis? Is that a county or region? Sahan, Sahan. I'm not familiar. But that damn place has its own journal. And their story by Joey Peters, who probably knows how to pronounce the name of the publication, says Border Patrol employee found, quote, covered in vomit in St. Paul, charged with drunk driving. I assume they figure that those things are connected, like the drunkenness resulted in the vomit. But I'd want to say, I vomited somewhere in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I don't know what happened to it. It's possible this is my vomit. I may have seen a Border Patrol employee and it induced vomiting. I don't want to cop to this, but I don't know who vomited on this guy. But as you know from Spinal Tap, they can't dust for vomit. So I'm not going to confess per se. I don't think they can pin this one on me. Actually, of course, obviously, it's something completely different. A Minnesota State Patrol trooper found Alfredo Mancias Jr. of Corpus Christi, Texas, slumped over in a car at 3:25 a.m. Tuesday in the Hamlin Midway neighborhood. I hope I'm pronouncing it. It says Hamline. I'm guessing it's maybe more like Hamlin, but I'm not sure. And I may have mispronounced it, which may have induced vomiting in others of you in the St. Paul, Minnesota area. I just want to say, but this is also a great example. Everybody keeps asking why, they're wearing masks because then they can't be identified, but they have limited or qualified immunity anyway, or Trump will pardon them, or they're wearing masks so that they're not identified as January 6th defendants, or I don't know, just generally inducing terror. But one of the reasons that they're wearing masks is that the Border Patrol employees who are arresting every brown person they see bear names like Alfredo Mancias. And they're from Corpus Christi, Texas, but they deploy them to Minneapolis so that they're not instantly recognized. Because I think Alfredo Mancias doing this masked in his own region would probably be recognized. I know you're Alfredo Mancias. That mask doesn't change anything for me. So ship him to Minneapolis where he won't initially be recognized. Anyway, by the way, I assume he was unmasked at the time, although I'm sure he would be covered in vomit if he vomited inside that mask. Maybe less, though. I'm just saying. He probably had the mask down. Maybe he took it off in time to vomit. I don't know. But it is true that I think they've recruited a number of the people from the communities that they're targeting, which is kind of sick and disgusting all by itself. All right. Anyway, I would read you the rest of the story, but one, we're out of time. And what more do you want to know? He vomited. He's drunk. This story is among others about how many members of ICE and Border Patrol who are out on the street are in fact carry arrest records for sexual assault and child molestation as well. And that should surprise no one. But there's a lot going on out there. And what else? It reminded me of a couple other things with the masks and yes, right, facial recognition. There's a great story also in the New York Times, which is illustrated with the great picture of a masked agent using, again, allegedly, the facial recognition software to keep a database of protesters and observers that they just don't like. And there's something just so ironic about a masked officer using facial recognition technology on protesters that all by itself, it's an amazing story. But this is a more amazing story about, like, I have suggested that perhaps the facial recognition technology that they're using for making arrests, anyway, of immigrants or suspected immigrants might not really even be valid facial recognition technology. It might just be a black box that spits out arrest this person every time you press the camera button. But this story suggests that there's really something more to it, and that they are now often identifying and shouting out the names of protesters that they are about to arrest, and they make them, they make it clear that we already know who you are. So there must be something behind it, and it's meant to be intimidating, and I guess it is. We only find out the names of the ICE cops if they shoot somebody or they vomit on themselves one at a time. But, but supposedly there's going to be a QR code on them at some point in the future. Sure, that'll be no help. So there you go. Something to read about that establishes that they might in fact have, they paid enough for it. Facial recognition technology in their pockets after all. So many more things that we intended to get to, but we just couldn't. But I think all the really super important stuff is out there. It should handle you well or stand you in good stead over the weekend. Now time to hand things over to Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy for his turn to prepare you for the weekend.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Let's get right down to some of those smaller stories we may have missed. A high school English teacher in Oklahoma fought a book ban, and now she may never teach again. A Uline employee says she can no longer work for people who helped America descend into fascism. And the Trump DOJ is nearly shut out by judges over cases that turn your stomach. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next week.